KPMG wants a $2,000 cash transaction limit. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian Heise here and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I thought we would have a look at KPMG's submission to the currency on the restrictions on the use of cash Bill 2019 that they gave to the Senate. Sorry, not the Senate, to Treasury. Now you can see here, these are all the submissions and we went through some of them in a previous video. But where's KPMG? It's not here. Well, it's actually located under K. Where is it? K here. Now I heard about this from a post from John Adams. He told me that it was hidden away. And if we have a look at the zip file, which I've opened, you can see all these individual submissions that people have made, different organizations, but there's KPMG there. Now, honest mistake or intentional deception? Well, let's have a look. Now, so just 45 minutes ago, Robert Berwick and Martin North discuss this KPMG submission. And I suggest you go and check out their channel because the CEC actually had some portions of their submission to Treasury redacted because of some of the issues they raised about KPMG. So for those of you that aren't familiar, this is the KPMG submission to the Senate. And we'll go through it, but I mean, it's not looking very high level. I mean, it's only what? 3 pages plus a cover page. But you say, oh, KPMG is probably just a small accounting firm. Well, no. It's a huge multinational corporation with revenue of over $28 billion and over 200,000 staff. Their headquarters in Switzerland and Netherlands. Okay, guys, just keep that in mind when we go through their submission. Okay, so let's see what KPMG wants. Let's see what they submitted to Treasury about this. So their submission for the exposure draft, currency restrictions on the use of cash bill and associated material. Are these like 3 different fonts they have here? I hate when people do that. Bloody hell, non-design. This is why accountants should not be allowed to design anything ever. So let's scroll down here. Executive summary. Executive summary. So KPMG supports the federal government's action against the black economy. The black economy is a significant cost to society, government revenue and services, and a haven for some of the most egregious criminals. Broadly, we support the proposal to limit the scope of transactions to be carried out via cash. We have some recommendations which would allow for the proposed legislation to better achieve its objectives. These include the cash payment limit, CPL, should be set lower than $10,000, ideally at $5,000 or even $2,000. $2,000, guys. That's not that much money. We would go and buy a beast, a full beast. Grass-fed, slow growth, hormone-free, non-halal, and we'll be paying probably over $2,000 for it. It'll last us a while, it tastes bloody good. But then I wouldn't be able to do that as a cash transaction, would I? I mean, come on. This is ludicrous. This is a fundamental attack on our civil liberties, guys. It's insane. Where the legislation is enacted with the CPL at 10,000, it should include provisions for the CPL to be reduced according to a specified timetable and via legislative instrument rather than requiring a future amendment to the Act. See, this is exactly what they want. Then they can have control over it. They can have control over it. This is what shocks me is when we look at the submissions to Treasury and we jump back here. A question I want to ask you is who didn't make a submission? Where's the Libertarian Party's submission? Where's the IPA's submission? Where? Guys, are they hidden in here as well? Let me know if you've seen them. What organizations that are meant to be proponents of our civil liberties are completely ignoring this? Is this just because it's not getting enough exposure? Which it could be. I was talking to John Adams yesterday about this, and he was saying how no one knows about it. When you're out in the public and talking to people, when you go buy something and you go, oh, have you heard of the cash transaction limit or the cash ban? And they look at you funny. What are you talking about? And I go, well, soon you won't be able to spend such and such. You know, all the 7-Eleven guys I've annoyed getting my $1 coffees about it. I hope you have too. So with a cash payment limit of $10,000, there would be an advantage in having to, I lost the mouse, in having to apply it. There we go. So with a cash payment limit of $10,000, there would be an advantage in having to apply it to those private transactions and gifts that would be accepted transactions under paragraph 5 of the proposed legislative instrument, noting that paragraph 10 would still protect individuals who have no reasonable alternative to using cash. Oh, isn't that nice? They want to reduce it. Oh. There would be a benefit to the community in providing an additional reason for individuals not to deal in such large quantities of cash. Yes, because us dumb plebs, we can't possibly deal with such large quantities of cash. I mean, come on, how paternalistic is this? This is ludicrous. And yet when I made a complaint to ASIC or the ACCC about this cloud token con that was scamming people, and now no one can get their money out, even after they threatened to, the scammers threatened to sue me, and I need to report a lawyer to their Victorian board. But even after, you know, I got hardly any response. They delayed, yada, yada, yada. But, it just shows you, doesn't it? It just shows you. The legislation should specifically state that entering into or seeking to enforce a contract that requires cash payment in excess of the CPL would be an offence under proposed Section 11. Detailed comments. General. KPMG welcomes the opportunity to comment on the exposure draft of currency restrictions restricting the use of Cash Bill 2019 and associated explanatory memorandum and draft legislative instruments as published by Treasury on the 26th of July 2019. Implementing measures to curtail the black economy is rightfully a high priority for the Commonwealth Government. Accordingly, we broadly support the intention of this reform to ensure that there are legal penalties for using cash as a medium of exchange in transactions above a certain limit. The $10,000 cash payment limit. The government should set the CPL at a lower level. At the very least, the legislation should allow for the scope of the CPL to be reduced over time via legislative instruments or regulation rather than via change to the legislation itself. A CPL of $5,000 or even $2,000 would be better suited to achieving the intent curbing of the black economic dealing. As an example of other countries' practices limited in France is Euro $1,000. And you know, one thing that Adams mentioned to me on the phone was that Germany 2016 cash ban, and this is the article from The Guardian, guys, and I'll link to this if you want to have a read through it, or I might look at it in another video. It didn't get through in Germany, did it? The Frenchies folded, but it didn't get through in Germany. I wonder if that would happen, you know, a few years later with the demographic changes that are occurring in their nation. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Where the government proceeds with the proposed $10,000 cash payment limit upon introduction of the bill to Parliament, it should additionally specify a time frame for introduction of lower CPLs in future. The exception for private transactions. The proposal to use a legislative instrument to define accepted transactions is the most appropriate mechanism, and this will allow the Treasurer to respond quickly to developments in cash transaction activity. The current draft would exclude gifts other than to a registered charity and non-business transactions from the CPL, where the CPL is legislated at $10,000. There remains a considerable possibility that many high-risk transactions could take place without breaching the CPL, yet the community generally would regard carrying that amount of cash around as unusual, risky, or suspicious behavior. Okay. Given that paragraph 10 of the proposed legislative instrument would protect individuals who have no reasonable alternative to using cash, there should be no practical disadvantage from having a CPL. Yes, it would. Yes, it would. You still would need to prove what they're setting up here is guilty until you can prove you're innocent. This is a complete reversal. This is just This is a fundamental attack on our freedoms. I know most people will never use this much tax. You can't even be bothered. Okay, even in business, it's much more convenient because most people are legitimate. They do it all through the books. They track it. And it's easier when it's just, you'll cop the tiny 1% credit card fee because it's just easier and more efficient in the end. It'll save you days of finding stuff. But that still doesn't mean that right should be taken away from us. 3.4. It is accepted that the CPL may be even more difficult to enforce in the context of private gifts and transaction. Yeah, you couldn't give, if you won at the casino, you won 20 grand at the casino, you want to give 10 grand to someone. However, a public awareness campaign highlighting that from 1st of January 2020, people will be doing the wrong thing has the potential to be effective in deterring behavior that may, even unintentionally, facilitate money laundering or otherwise be an enabler of black economic activity. See, my concern here is that they are proposing the public awareness campaign before the legislation. Oh no, after the legislation gets in, not before. This is getting me upset. Where, as we recommended in Section 2, the government in future reduces the CPL. See how they recommend? Yeah. To a level such as $2,000, that might impact private transactions that were relatively much lower risk. The legislative instrument could then be activated to classify private transactions between the CPL and a reasonably higher amount as accepted transactions. See, this whole thing. You know what? Here's a theory of why they want it. It adds a shitload of extra complexity to business and individual transactions, so it's going to be more money for them. What do you reckon, guys? Let me know if you think about that theory. So 2 tiers of offence for both parties to the transaction. It is appropriate for the offence to be applied to both parties to the transaction. We also support the 2 tiers of offence, based firstly on strict liability and then a more serious offence where there is reckless behaviour. Making both parties to the transaction guilty of an offence may act as a substantial deterrent to either party seeking to enforce a contract that stipulates the payment and amounts will breach the CPL in cash form. Nonetheless, it should be beneficial for the bill to state that reckless behaviour for the purpose of the proposed Section 11 would include entering into or seeking to enforce a contract. There we go. So that's their submission. This is the submission from an organisation of more than 200,000 people and revenue of over $28 billion US a year. So guys, all of you can frankly put together a submission of this caliber and get it into the Senate. Today is the last day, the 15th of November. Get it in, guys. But one more thing. Let's have a look at the CEC submission, and we won't read through it, but you can find that on the Treasury if you want. But look at this here. Look at these black texts. What are these things? This is redacted information. It is the CEC's contention that this law recommended by such and such, KPMG, has absolutely nothing to do with cracking down on money laundering and tax evasion. Rather, this law is the latest extreme measure that Treasury and the government, in parallel with governments around the world, are pursuing in order to permanently change the relationship between citizens and the financial system. So they're redacting. Seems odd, doesn't it? Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. Like, share and subscribe. Please share this video to people today, of all days. It's the last chance to get a submission in. And do not be intimidated by, if you're watching, what Martin North or the CEC or what John Adams are putting together in these well-crafted things. Just remember, guys, that KPMG, a firm with over $28 billion of revenue, 200,000 employees, that's nearly 100 years old, or over 100 years old, 200 years old, the oldest component. You could have a better font layout and better styling than them. Let me know what you think, guys. Take care. If you like my content, please share it. If you'd like to support me, I have a Patreon and a Subscribestar. Also have Amazon and eBay, where I receive a commission for your purchases. Doesn't cost you a cent. And I also have PayPal. Take care, guys. Have a great day. And spend your cash while you can.